All right, we're live, and let me call the meeting to order. Again, I'd like to welcome all of you to our I guess main meeting. It's sort of late today. Did everyone have an opportunity to review the minutes of the previous meeting? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Fine. Are there any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Let's just move to the CEO report.
Yeah, Alan, just first in our public meeting, I'd like to just introduce some of our new staff. We've got Mark Palco, who's our controller, Anne Marie Rollins, who's working on the finance staff, and Joe Galea, who's director of facilities. So we'd like to welcome all those to the Alliance staff. And what I'd like to do first is just go through a little bit of the St. Rose campus update. As you can imagine, this has taken a good bit of staff time on this. Again, we are staffing the Albany County Pine Hills Land Authority through a management agreement. And we have some 71 buildings, 930,000 square feet on 27 and a little bit more acres of property in the Pine Hills neighborhood of the city of Albany. I'm pleased to announce that so far, so good. I think the staff that we hired from the College of St. Rose, the security and the maintenance staff, have been continuing to maintain the campus adequately. And with Joe Galea coming on board, we've really kind of upped our game there. There have been, the normal break-ins here and there. But the good part about it is those have been identified very quickly, Albany Police dispatched, and nothing really serious has occurred as a part of that. As you may know from our last board meeting, we entered into a license agreement with Albany County to provide some temporary occupancy at the campus, which everybody thought would be a good idea just to get bodies and back on that campus and human breath in those buildings. We all know that empty buildings somehow deteriorate quicker than occupied buildings. So to that effect, we initially provided space in the Events and Athletic Center to the Departments of Aging, Veterans, and Recreation, which are there and present a real presence there. At today's, and I'd like to just mention that we're entering into the first amendment to that agreement for 5 additional buildings that the county will be occupying. And they include, this is a little bit more in the Events and Athletic Center, which I just mentioned to you, 420 Western Avenue, the library at 392 Western Avenue, the Hearst Communications Building, which is 996 Madison Avenue, the President's Office Building, which is 1000 Madison Avenue, and then the 1006 Madison Avenue, which is right next to the President's Office. It was formerly the college's counseling office. And in addition to that, we're going to be providing 90 parking spaces to the county. So that is an agreement that I signed and have sent over to the county executive to countersign. And again, this will be a way of getting more live bodies on that campus, which is just a good thing all the way around. And whether they turn out to be permanent locations or not, that's left to be determined. So things are going well there. We have also interviewed a series of firms to do our master plan for the campus. The single most important part of which, in my opinion anyway, is the part of the plan which is known as public engagement. And that is to bring along and get input and cooperation from the constituents that we have, and whether that's from the local neighborhood association to, the people in the city generally, or throughout the county, and not the least of which being our elected officials. The more you're able to get input and have people's ideas, thoughts, and hopes reflected in the master plan, the more successful that master plan is going to be in implementing it. Something Governor Hochul mentioned at her $400 million press conference last week was, they're doing a very similar study there. They've hired a group out of Manhattan to do it, MIG consultants. And she said, the exact same thing, that, you want to get the community involved, but she really kind of, in a kind of, I thought, somewhat of a courageous way, said, everybody's really got to be on board for this, and we can't let individuals become obstructionists for the greater good. I'm confident that the group that we've tentatively identified, we will, we'll be able to do that and come up with a plan, hopefully by the end of the year, if not sooner, that will kind of tell us, what the highest and best uses for the campus are, and where on the campus those uses should be. One of the things that we're seeing tremendous, I don't know, I think it's probably the single highest number of inquiries is from childcare and pre-K programs. Apparently there's a huge demand, unmet demand for childcare and pre-K, and the state has come out with some funding opportunity to fund capital costs for pre-K and childcare facilities, and we've gotten probably, I'd say, maybe even close to a dozen inquiries for that on the campus. So, again, that's just an example of, where on the campus would you put that, and what uses would be complementary to that being immediately adjacent, and what uses would not. So those are the kind of things that the architects, engineers will kind of help us think through as we go through that plan and redevelop the campus. And we know that there are going to be things that come up in the meantime, while the plan is being done, that are opportunities that might be too great to pass up on. And we can't just wait till the end of the year and tell everybody else, no, you can't do that. And we'll just have to be flexible and nimble, and in my opinion, completely and totally transparent, because we want to keep everybody informed so nobody's surprised and there's not any ill effects of any kind of development that goes in there. So it's a lot to manage, but we're ready for it. I think the planning firm that we've identified is up for the charge, and I think that'll be money well spent. Any questions on the St. Rose campus before I move on to the central warehouse?
Can I ask three?
Sure.
I believe the governor, when she talked about the outside consultant, wanted the results in a rapid manner, because she wanted to get on with this. Are those the instructions to the outside consultants that you?
Absolutely.
And I guess it's two questions. And we're the operating arm of the authority.
Correct. We're the staff.
Right. And when you talk about some of these agreements, is this something they've all had to approve too?
Yes. The authority is the legal owner of the property. So, and as Tom mentioned a little bit earlier, all of this stuff is under tremendous amount of scrutiny by the so-called ABO, or the Authority Budget Office. All of this stuff is subject to the Paris reporting system. And Amy, what does Paris stand for? It's not France. It's
Public Authority Reporting
Information
System, right? So all of this stuff, and there's tremendous amount of scrutiny on these kind of things. So we've gone to extreme lengths, and thanks to our attorney, Tom Owens here, we're in good shape as far as our compliance and everything we've done on that. So, but the authority, I think that the next authority board meeting is June 12th.
Yes.
So we've got a whole series of approvals that they've got to do at that meeting.
So Kevin, very exciting. Love to hear about the progress, long-term planning. You have the consultant come in. I think that it's very important for the consultant to gather the constituent information, to hear what everybody wants, their concerns as a general guidance. In my opinion, it's going to be specific users for specific facilities, because some of those facilities were built for specific uses, and that's their best use.
Okay.
When we go to potentially enter transactions and shift some of those properties to private owners, public entities, it was a campus. So how do you carve it up legally, creating legal parcels, or are we contemplating long-term ground leases, a combination of both? And then is the municipality going to cooperate with some setbacks here and some shared entrances here? And because if you go by the letter of law and you start trying to carve that up, before, there's buildings that never were to be on separate parcels. It was a campus,
Right.
So things flowed there.
Right.
And to carve it up is going to be a pretty significant task.
Yeah, Rich, you're spot on, and you know from being in the industry. The tax maps, everything, this is Rich saying, this was built as a campus. So they never intended that any of this stuff would be broken up. So not only we've got tax maps that are, literally intersecting existing buildings, they're just, it's all of this stuff has got to be straightened out, and that's where our attorneys and, some of our other consultants are going to help us with. The county executive has told me that he's had conversations with with Mayor Sheehan, and that she's on board about being supportive of doing whatever we have to do to straighten out that ownership. I don't want to prejudge what the consultants are going to come back with, but some of these buildings, we may be able to sell them, but we may have to enter into operating agreements to provide them HVAC services, for example, because they're all interdependent.
Sure.
All of those, generally speaking, all the buildings around that center quad in there are interconnected, and all of those utilities are right below that center quad. There are tunnels through which, heating, air conditioning,
Is there
utilities.
individual water feeds to each building or
Right.
not? And if they're on loops, then you get into a transportation company, and so it's a very sophisticated structure.
But, and Rich, I think you're familiar with this because I believe your firm was involved in it, but the University Heights project over on New Scotland Avenue, which was a brainchild of a gentleman who's since passed, Marty Silverman, who put together a consortium of, Alan, help me out here, the medical college, the pharmacy college, Russell Sage,
And the law school.
and the law school. And they built some joint buildings there, a dormitory, and there's some research, and that's what they've done. They've kept an operating entity up, a small, 1 or 2 person group, just to manage the distribution of utilities and common area costs and things like that. That's maybe what happens with this here. We'll have to see, but
So
that is something that the
consultant looking at that?
yeah, because,
Okay.
these are not just land use planning people. These are architects, engineers, and urban planners as well. But that is going to be, a bit of a.
For me, that's the big work.
Yeah. That's, there's some, Centennial Hall, the newer dormitory on Madison Avenue, that is a standalone building. All of the utilities are right there. It's a geothermal, and it's right within their footprint. It's on an individual tax map, but there is a lot of work that has to be done on that front.
Yeah.
And not the least of which, we, the authority, has to have by law, has to have appraisals for every single piece of property that they sell. They don't have to sell it for the amount that the appraisal comes in for.
Right.
But, you know, particularly if it's to the county, because there's a public purpose in that. You know, there's a lot of
Yeah.
legal and regulatory structure that all this has to be done into, and it takes time, and, you know, everybody wants things to happen right away, and it just,
Yeah,
you know, somebody once told me, time takes time,
sure.
so, we'll get through that. But any other questions on the campus?
So if buildings are sold to the county, do we have a structure where we're limiting that? Because then you take away the tax revenue. And that's the problem with Albany right now, is
I'm
that they have, that's the problem with Albany right now.
Yeah,
The city of Albany is that they have so many properties that they're not getting tax revenue. So where do you get that from?
Yeah, well, that's, you know, the one, you know, listen, ideally, you'd like to have, you know, private property owners there paying taxes, but, you know, it's not like you had taxable property that would become tax exempt by the county's ownership. The college was property tax exempt, so this property has never been taxed for the last 120 years. You know, but we expect that some of this property on here will wind up in private hands and be property taxable.
Some of the residential stuff.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, there has been some inquiries about doing a 55-plus residential community here. You know, there's been, you know, the county executive has identified a need for a seniors center here. There is not a seniors center in the city of Albany, apparently. So there's, you know, there's a lot of ideas, and we've cataloged all of these, and we're going to turn all of these over to the consultants for when they do their work, you know, and figure out what goes where. You know, but again, you know, back to Rich's point, this is a complicated piece of property. It's not 71 distinct individual properties with individual tax maps and separate utilities. It's just.
Or access.
I'm sorry?
Or access or.
Right. That's a good, another good point. You know, you've got to figure out, you know, where, you know, who do you give access to what? You know, that quad in the middle of, you know, the EAC, St. Joe's, and you know, that's just green space. You know, I doubt if anybody's going to want to pay for that, but, you know, that may be just something that is there. And it's like a, you know, the county executive uses the term as a homeowners association, you know, that would, you know, exist to just manage those common areas, which is a common thing.
The title company's gonna have fun with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working with Synergy a lot. The tax lines, we have a meeting next week, kind
Yeah.
of sort of trying to figure out tax lines. It's not simple.
No.
It's every imaginable permutation, combination, and variation.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, just as an example, when we went to close on the campus, you know, after the auction, we found out by the title company that the college did not own 200 feet of the Hellman Library. It was still owned by the Sisters of St. Joseph de Carondelet. They just, somebody way back in the
Never cleaned it
1930s
up. Yeah.
forgot to transfer that piece. But, you know, thankfully, the sisters are still involved, and they immediately transferred title, and it wasn't an issue. But, you know, again, back to Rich's point, this is not a small issue to untangle. It's you know, significant.
So to be continued at future meetings. As someone that uses the retail activities in that area, I am very hopeful that campus will be populated with people that will support that grouping of stores and restaurants. But it's just not something we can anticipate at this moment in time. So this we'll expect progress when you come back and.
Yeah, I think so. You're gonna see, you know, as Mike McLaughlin tells me, although the county executive is an extremely patient individual, he's got a sense of urgency about.
No, this is the one exception. I don't know.
You don't know how that happened.
I don't know how it happened. I have no idea.
Okay.
So anyway, listen, the other thing that I'd like to say here, the authority board is done a great job. The chairman, a gentleman by the name of Dominic Mazza, former county manager for Livingston County, and he's got a career in accounting, has done a great job, and John Nigro as vice chairman, and we've got, some very talented and a relevant experience on that board elsewhere. Sarah Reginelli, I believe, is Joanne's appointment, was the president of Capitalize Albany, knows this stuff, and the city of Albany inside and out, which is very helpful. Jasmine Higgins is a local housing developer, and I know I'm missing a few. Who else we got on there?
Allison Walsh.
Oh, Allison Walsh is with the New York State, Empire State Development, and she's responsible for institutional redevelopment. So she works on redeveloping prisons and psychiatric centers for the state. So she's another, very experienced person. So, we're fortunate that, between the mayor, the county executive, and the chairman of the legislature, we've got some really great appointees there and they're absolutely dedicated. And, again, like all of you, they get no compensation for it. This takes up a lot of their time. And I think we've had very few meetings where we haven't had 100% attendance. And these are meetings that I sometimes have to schedule in a week's notice. So they're doing a great job and should be commended. So again, on to our next project, Central Warehouse. As you know, we sent out an RFP for demolition. We selected a firm, and no sooner did we get an Article 78 action by by disgruntled bidder. They filed what's called an Article 78 proceeding against us in County Supreme Court. We hired the Don Hillman from the Couch White firm to represent us. Tom has been involved in this along the way, and we feel very confident in our position on it. We have oral arguments on June 3rd, and we would expect, hopefully, we would expect a response from the judge shortly. Although I'm told that, there have been cases on these Article 78 things that has dragged out to 6 or 8 months. I think there was a case, what was it, down in Rockland or Orange?
Don talked about it. We hope to get it as soon as practical.
Yeah. Because, to me, it's pretty much cut and dry. The plaintiff is accusing the alliance as being a municipality. And if you're a municipality, you have to take the lowest bid, no questions. The Alliance, of course, is not a municipality. It's a private, nonprofit corporation. And our RFP did not say that the low bid would be the criteria. The board of this organization approved this without, knowing what the criteria were. And, quite honestly, in my mind, the single most important factor that I, assessed this on was, the public safety. Let's not forget, we've got a rail right-of-way immediately adjacent to this building. I mean, you could almost literally reach out the window of the train and touch that building. And that's going to be a big part of how this project goes forward. But so we're hopeful. We'll see what happens. We'll alert, I'm sure that it'll be in the papers once the judge posts her decision on this. So,
Kevin, if this delays, you have a wrap around one side of the building.
Right.
But I see they put a cannabis dispensary just popped up right next to it. I don't know why anyone would build there without this building being taken down, but it's there. That's a risk too, right? If something.
Yeah, I don't know. That came as a surprise to us. We knew nothing about that. But it's set back far enough, and these demolition firms set up these debris curtains and barriers to prevent, any kind of anything serious happen. And all of the demolition, I'm told, is done carefully and with a lot of water, which keeps the dust down and the debris down. The first thing that has to happen here, of course, is the environmental remediation. There is asbestos between the floors of the buildings. It's in the mastic that was, they had, between the slabs of concrete, they had cork, I guess as an insulator, and that cork was laid down with an asbestos, with a mastic that was laden with asbestos. So that's all got to be mitigated before the full demolition can take place. And again, that's, Department of Labor, has very specific requirements for how that works. And again, all of these demolition companies are experienced in that. The company that we identified, Gramercy Lero, has got extensive experience doing live rail demolitions in New York City, in Manhattan, actually. And the other thing that's happened, by the way, is the temporary restraining order that we were under has been lifted. So we can in fact enter into a contract with with Gramercy Lero as soon as we have a contract ready to go.
So that's in the works? That's not dependent on the Article 78?
Yes, and yes.
Yeah, okay,
It is
because the
in the
big thing
works.
is,
And if the Article 78 were to go against us, it would be affected.
right,
It could be, but we just don't know. But we are working on the contract. Yeah,
Yeah,
we have
because filing for the asbestos permits with the Department of Labor, I mean, that's, again,
Right. Yeah, the good part about it is, this isn't the only, Governor Hochul announced the replacement of the Livingston Avenue Bridge, which is the bridge that the Amtrak train goes over and passes by the central warehouse. And the contractor that we identified is also involved in that project, so that there may be some, economies or time savings that can be generated by that. But, we'll find out once, after the oral arguments are filed and the judge makes her decision.
So once Gramercy Lero signs the contract with us, they can start work, or they have to wait for all this to clear out?
Oh, no, we have to wait for all this. Mike, do you recall the name of the judge again? It's
Sherry Brooks.
What is it?
Sherry Brooks.
Cherry Brooks, right, Judge?
Brooks
What's the
Judge Brooks
timing
Morton.
on her decision? What's the expected timing on the?
Joanne, the attorneys tell us it could be literally as quickly as a week, but could drag on for months. We're hoping that given the gravity of the condition of this building and listen, there were chunks, refrigerator-sized chunks that have fallen off that building, and that's why the city put that netting around it. But if you drive around the basement, you'll see these chunks of concrete sitting down there, and who knows what, the passage of, well, we all know the passage of time will not do anything good for that. So it's, there is some urgency.
Does the state know that the cannabis dispensary is there? It's
They-
illegal, is it legal?
Yeah,
It is,
Yeah.
it was permitted by the city.
it's across the street, Mike, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Right.
Yeah, so if you get off that exit, that kind of arterial exit,
Colony Street.
yeah, that comes straight down into downtown. It's right there on that corner with the billboard. It's a fantastic location, frankly. But it's not ideal from
Not
a
ideal,
redevelopment
yeah.
perspective because.
Unless nothing happens over there, then they're.
Yeah, right.
And just one thing, Mike just raised a point here that, there is some discussion of this site being developed as a tourism site, kind of sort of right beneath this, but a little bit further down and to the east of the building is the historic Lock 1 of the Erie Canal. It's all been, buried, but there is some discussion by some folks to excavate that and have that be a kind of, maritime waterfront tourism attraction. And apparently this has been done in other places and it's been successful. So, that would be, because the Alliance is going to own this property. It owns it now, it will continue to own it. And, the charge will then be, what do we do with this property? And is it for this tourism effort? Maybe, some of you may have heard the work of BJ Costello and Len Tantillo on, kind of trying to reinvigorate some waterfront access. And this will be exactly that, but it'll be waterfront related. So we'll see what happens there. So next we have we've made some progress also on the Altech Steel site up in Colony, and I'd like to turn this over to Clayton Besh to talk a little bit about the selection process for the consultant that we hired to do the GEIS.
Thank you, Kevin. Back in December 2024, we put out an RFP for a generic environmental impact statement and a master plan for the Altech Steel site down in Colony, the borders to Waterloo. That RFP was released in the Times Union and in the ESD's, New York City ESD's contract reporter. We got 6 applicants. The staff reviewed them. They passed. We presented those 6 to the review committee. We evaluated, and 3 were identified as being opportunities. Those 3 were then gave in-person presentations to the review committee. And the winner of that review process was McFarland Johnson. And their proposal will to operate these, to complete these GEIS and master plan to prepare the site for potential for eventual development. It will take about a year, and the project is expected to not exceed $285,000. Are there any questions?
Just quickly, this is the single best industrial site we have in the county. It is as our resident expert here on tax foreclosures will tell us, this is a kind of in lieu of foreclosure project. This is a state Superfund site that we were able to negotiate a liability agreement with the Department of Environmental Conservation. They've been extremely cooperative with us in doing this. They've spent, I don't know, Clayton,
27 years.
how much money have they spent on it?
Torn down.
Yeah, probably 20 million plus. They've torn down all the surface structures, but there is ground contamination here, which we have agreed, and DEC has agreed to us, will not be remediated. They've said we can develop the site by capping it, and that's a common practice, that they believe that trying to remove those contaminants from the soil, and this is the heavy metals and bad stuff, would be worse for the environment than just capping it and redeveloping it as it is. And that presents some challenges going forward in how you have to redevelop this. The Department of Environmental Conservation also allowed to put this in the Brownfields tax credit program, which makes this more attractive for a developer to come in there and redevelop this site. And but we need to get this work done, this generic environmental impact statement. And that's what Clayton's been working on. And there's a resolution for your consideration here today to award this contract accordingly. Tom, anything you?
No, sir. No, the resolution is in your packet. It's actually, the number should be 2025-05. It says 02, but it's 05 because it's May. 05-01. And it's immediately after the meeting minutes. The resolution starts on page 3 and 4 of your packet.
So is there a motion to approve this resolution? Okay, second? Okay, any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything else, Tom?
No, keep going.
Yeah, the next, this is really just an informational item. The Albany County Capital Resources Corporation, which we also manage on your behalf, has approved a public hearing which took place a couple weeks ago to issue $37 million in bonds for the redevelopment of the so-called Capitol Center, the convention center downtown. And that will be brought to the CRC for final approval at next week's meeting. So, hopefully we'll see a redeveloped convention center with a State Street office. And I don't know if anybody here would like to make any comments on that. I know chairwoman of the county legislature, who was actively involved in this, and so was the county exec's office.
I mean, what I'll say is that the chairwoman did yeoman's work getting all the members of the legislature to come around to the concept of supporting the convention center and its bid to expand. I'm the county executive, one of the county executives' appointments on the board. So now that, you know, we are in a position to move forward, I can say pretty definitively that for those who are aware, the final product of the convention center was a downsized version of the original plan. And certainly they've come out of COVID, they are successful. They're pretty much full all the time, but they aren't really hitting the size and scope of event that was originally intended. And so there's been some controversy related to other convention centers and function halls in the area saying you're eating into my business. And so this expansion would kind of push them out of that smaller category into that middle category that I think was the original intention. And so that concept, coupled with their current inquiry rate for events of that size and occupancy rate, which is very, very high, I think is a very positive indication for the future. And it was a bit of a lift, but the chairwoman made it look easy, so it was no problem.
Yeah, so, no, we're excited about this, as I mentioned before. We think it's a good kind of recalibration of a goal of ours in the legislature and in the exec's office, which is more funding out of HOT that would be fueled toward our economic development. So, but this is gonna kind of move fast. We have, like I said, we introduced the local law. We're gonna introduce the reso in this next cycle. We already, it will be reported out, the local law for a public hearing, which will be in July, or no, June, the end of June. So we're gonna plan on moving these fast. They should both be done in July, which works for the convention center's timing because they've got the bond stuff kind of moving along as well. And the other little piece of this is part of the deal is also that they got $10 million from the governor in the budget for this project. So I think the thinking is that, you know, when I listened to you before, there's so many things that are happening all at once.
Right.
St. Rose, the 400 million, the convention center, and it is having this ripple effect that's really good, really a lot of energy, and this is gonna be one of them, but we're gonna see signs of this hopefully really quickly on State Street, because part of the convention center plan is to take over that, one of those historic buildings right down from the Wellington. So I think it's also going to kind of send signals to the community, you know what? This is all really gonna happen, and it's gonna have just a tremendous impact that in 5 years, we're probably gonna be looking back saying, wow, look at all the stuff that's been done in not just the city, but Albany County.
Any questions on that? Just again, offshore wind update. Kevin Catalano and I attended the IPF, which is the Offshore Wind Trade Industry Show down at Virginia Beach several weeks ago. And it was somewhat like a wake, and not like a good wake, like an Irish wake. It was a very downbeat wake. There was a blanket, you know, a kind of a cloud over the industry. Everybody, for the most part, has put pencils down. As you know, President Trump canceled an ongoing project off the coast of Long Island, the so-called Empire Wind Project. Luckily, Governor Hochul intervened and got the president to lift his work stop on that. But, you know, the federal administration is still opposed to offshore wind. As you know, that was a tremendous opportunity for Albany County. We had over $2 billion of interest in ports of Queens and Albany for offshore wind manufacturing projects, which are all going to be on hold for the present or foreseeable future anyway. Lastly, I'll just mention something Joanne mentioned. Governor Hochul announced the $400 million CAP program, the Championing Albany's Potential program. We will have 2 properties owned by the Alliance in that, the Central Warehouse and the McDonald's building at the corners of Pearl and Madison Avenue. So, who knows, there may be something there. We will be, their consultants, this big consulting group has reached out to us, and we'll be putting them in touch with the consultants for St. Rose, and we'll be talking to them about our properties. And I think, again, apropos to what Joanne was just saying, there's just a tremendous amount of development momentum that's built up. And that, in the economic development business, that is self-sustaining. That kind of momentum just attracts additional attention and additional projects. And if we can just keep that going, we can really see a change in our county and to the benefit of all of the residents of the county. This is going to be economic opportunity and, great things happening. So, any questions on any of that? If not, I'll turn it over to our CFO, Mr. Chairman, if he is, to give the financial report.
Inadvertently left off of the agenda was the April financials. I don't know, Alan, do you want to do that?
Sure.
Or you want me to?
On the budget. So with the April year-to-date budget, revenues came in $1.1 million, which is pretty much right on the budget. It's only a variance of $3,000. As most of you can see, that comes from reimbursements the Alliance receives back from the Altech Loan Fund, the Pine Hills Land Authority, and obviously CRC. As was mentioned earlier, there's $137,000 from the hot tax for the first 4 months, as well as some interest income that we get from our investments. The big expense items besides payroll, which has grown as we've added staff, have been the legal and professional services, which we have an actual through 4 months of $415,000 versus a budget of $189,000. I'm assuming that's a lot of it is due to the central warehouse. Yeah, okay. Then, as you can see, our other business expenses are slightly above, but not to the extent of the legal and professional. From salaries and expenses, we're just a little bit over with some of our new hires. In total, the change in that position was a negative $415,000 compared to a budget of a negative $122,000. So there's a variance of $293,000. However, I think most of that is in the legal and professional expenses we talked about. The balance sheet's very strong. I think there's close to $7.4 million in cash for the balance sheet. So that's my report.
So for the hotel occupancy tax update, as mentioned, we are allotted 0.5% of the hotel tax. We did receive $138,000 in the first quarter, which is actually December through February for that time period. Budgeted amount for that for the year is $600,000, so I think we're probably going to come in pretty close to that, if not a little bit more. Any questions on that?
Can I ask a question? Why is there variance on rent? Don't we know what the rent is compared to budget?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's the land bank, maybe.
Yeah, it should be the 79. It looks like it's off a month.
Oh, is that like a timing?
So it may have, that should have probably went to prepaid because we pay it a few days before to get it there by the 1st. So that's probably just what it is. So it'll
So
It'll all,
year end, it'll be.
it'll all equal out, yep.
We'll look into that.
Yes. Okay, so. Just quickly an update on St. Rose invoicing. As Kevin mentioned, we do manage 5 different things. And Joe, who's our newly hired Director of Facilities Operations, a lot of his time has been allocated to St. Rose. So going forward, most of his salary and part of Corey's, we will be invoicing St. Rose for the allocation that is currently going to them. I'm thinking it should be between the two of them, maybe roughly 160,000 annually for salaries and benefits. And then review of the investment portfolio, as Alan had mentioned, I think we have roughly 6.7 million in CDs. Those are staggered across, 3 and 6 months and range from 3% to 3.25% interest for the corporation to gain as much revenue and interest.
And I think the lion's share of this is our stage
It is.
funding, right? So
Yes.
this is money that we will be paying out to companies as we provide grants through the stage program.
And that's it for me.
Okay. Let's go to the stage, speaking of stage, let's go to the stage application. Is a project that is for consideration by the board for funding, what to recommend to the stage committee.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and for you who haven't been to the stage, we vote here, and if approved here, we take it to a stage committee, usually in about 2 to 3 weeks. What we're looking at today is resolution 25-5-2, which is a grant to what we all know as Crane Stationery. They were part of the Mohawk paper. Mohawk purchased them in about 2017, 2018, relocated them to Albany with the sale of Mohawk paper to Federgoni. Federgoni didn't want Crane paper, so there was a transaction to sell Crane paper. A gentleman by the name of Robert Bueller, he came in, he's out of Carolinas. Is relocating his family here. He is the majority owner of, or the largest shareholder of the new Crane Stationery. And what qualifies this is we look at, stage, sustainable technology and green energy. They use 100% cotton paper. Less than 1% of all paper made today is 100% cotton. It's archival art paper, it's currency paper, really fine art type stuff. Some attorneys use it in their processes. 90% of paper is 100% wood pulp, and then you've got percentages of cotton and wood between that 90 and 99%, and less than 1% is 100% cotton. And how they get it is it comes out of the textile mills. When they're gonna go make, materials or any type of textile, they can use the excess and make paper out of it. So they are relocating from the Mohawk paper campus in Cohoes to one of the Plug Power sites up in Latham that, if you remember, Plug Power consolidated everything out in Vista. They left the campus on Watervliet Shaker Road, just up from Keeler. That campus is going to be empty. They'll be taking over about 50,000 square feet of one of the buildings there. We're retaining 50 employees. These jobs were potentially gone. They did get courted by several communities around Albany and into Massachusetts. They have decided to stay here. We're going to maintain 50 jobs. That's a little bit less than when the announcement was made that they were going to be selling, but we retained 50. He's got 15 people outside of the county that work for him. A lot of it doing, technology, invoicing, stuff that can be done off-site, people that he knows. They're going to spend about $550,000 to $600,000 to move, electrical upgrade, some new equipment and machinery. What they're asking for is $54,400. They're looking at currently keeping the 50
in Albany County, and they expect to have 51 additional employees over the next 5 years.
Kevin, do they still make the paper for the US currency?
Actually, Crane Paper had sold that prior to the Mohawk transaction. So it's a completely different company owned by somebody else. Right now, they actually are working with Federal Government to create the paper. And what they do is they take the cardstock on sheets, cut it and print it. And if you've seen a Crane Paper stationery, it is incredible. It is a process of printing and etching where if you want 3 colors, you take that one card and you put it through 3 different 1900s press machines, printing press machines. There is nothing current in this. This is old style, skilled labor printing, and he was generous enough to give us some of the cards, and they are spectacular. As you walk through the plant, it's amazing because everybody that works on certain cards will put them on their machines. It is the who's who of Hollywood, of musicians, I honestly,
Well, Cartier.
oh yeah, they make all the cards for Cartier, they make all the cards for the Blue Box people. Tiffany. Yeah, I don't shop there, I'm sorry. On a budget, want to retire someday. But they have, some amazing relationships. Part of the package was the Vera Wang and some other Crane stationery products. But Kevin and I had a really nice lunch with Robert. Just a really down-to-earth gentleman that wants to stay here in Albany. He's relocating his family here. And what he's asking for in incentives from us is just over $54,000.
Just on Crane Paper, getting back to Alan's good, Crane Paper, we're told, and everybody has confirmed this, is the 3rd oldest company in the United States. They go back to the Revolutionary War period. And I think there was even some involvement by Paul Revere.
They can trace it back to 1801.
1801.
And
The Crane family is in Pittsfield.
Still there.
Still there, and, they are, I think, are they investors now, or did they drop out?
We'll leave that for another
They may
day.
go back into this, but it's a very, very interesting legacy. And as Alan said, this is the company that used to print all of the paper upon which our currency is printed on. And they sold it off for some ridiculous amount of money to some other company, but kept this other business, the card stock and the engraving. And Kev, how long does it take them to teach somebody to engrave?
They'll have somebody there for a year before they can really start to work on their own. And I mean, when we were there one time, they were showing us these cards and they're like, yeah, we wouldn't send that out. We're all looking at it like, what do you mean you wouldn't send this out? Oh, if you look, one of the tentacles on the butterfly is just a little shorter and doesn't have that little ball on the end, so that doesn't pass.
Okay.
So.
Send it here.
What?
Great
Don't
media.
send it here.
Yeah. There's a resolution to be voted on, sir.
Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, very quickly, this is pursuant to a law passed by the county legislature in 2022. And specifically in that law, it directed certain regulations to be adopted. Our corporation is specifically identified in the law and the regulations as the entity that administers the grant program. So that's why we see this, that's why we manage this program. As Kevin had mentioned, our goal or our function here is simply to recommend funding, as you see in this resolution, to the stage committee. They will actually make the funding determination. But our function is to determine eligibility, application, criteria requirements are met, and basically the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed in the grant application process, and then pursuant, if the board so chooses to recommend it, it would then go to the stage committee for the actual funding determination. So that's it.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Real quick, Kevin and Kevin, fantastic job. They've been an Albany institution forever. And it also will free up that Mohawk site without having them in there tying up that building. Mm.
That's another story for another day. Okay, thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Again, thank you. Lastly, we've subjected John Regan to the entire meeting. John was,
I'll teach him.
well, John was agreed to be a member of the council that reviewed the arts and cultural responses, and so since was named chairman of the group. And so I thought it would be useful to have him come in today and make some comments about the process and the results. In his day job, he's a senior lawyer at the Albany Medical Center.
Thank you. So thank you for having me today. As Alan mentioned, it has been a privilege to serve as chairman of the council subcommittee for the arts for the Advanced Albany Alliance. We are made up of appointees and folks from across the region, across the county, including Len Cantillo, noted artist, Judy Gilmore, Linda Chalmers-Jackson, Christine Miles from the Art Institute, Alan Goldberg, and myself. And I think that's everybody. And obviously backed up by Sarah and Antoinette and Kevin. And I think that the committee as a whole was really impressed and gratified by, the county legislature under your leadership, Madam Chairperson, and the county executive for supporting arts and culture in the county. I think that, as a whole, we believe that sort of any society that doesn't support arts and culture sort of loses the right to call itself civilized, and that the opportunities that supporting arts and culture give a region aren't just in arts and culture, but also in the economy and hospitality and really sort of everything, that all great sort of advancements in human achievement throughout history start in the arts and culture and sort of from there. So as you are probably aware, in December, we presented to you a list of, at that point, I think 5 or 6 organizations for the county was so generous enough through their advocacy to include just over $1 million in the county budget. And we got out the first tranche in December through your assistance, so thank you for that. The sheets that you have in front of you represent the second and final tranche of the allocated money for this fiscal year. And so I don't want you to sort of focus too much on the requests and proposed awards, other than the fact that we received something like 43 applications overall. We are funding here, I think 25 or 27 is the final number. It's been a while since I actually counted, but we looked at individual artists. We looked at partnerships. We looked at sort of a depth and breadth of people that make Albany County diverse and exciting and interesting. And I think came up with a really good list of both projects and funding. And so what you see before you today is the result of that list, a cross-cultural, cross-county list. The criteria was that the project either had to be completed within Albany County or the person had to be resident in Albany County in order to qualify. So there were a few applicants that did not qualify because they were outside the county, and we were really looking to keep it sort of within the county, within the purview, to support both the spirit and the letter of the appropriation. And so the numbers you see before you represent about $730,000 of the remaining appropriation. There's just a little bit of money left over for last minute projects that may be coming in. We solicited really sort of across publications and across contacts and networks and solicited from officials who have vested interest but we know there will be somebody when the announcement comes out that says, hey, what about us? And so we reserved a very small amount for that. But other than that, we submit to you for your approval this list of applications. Just so you know, part of the application process will include report backs to the Alliance as to how they are spending the money, mid-year reports. I know, actually, Alan and Kevin were mentioning Len Tantillo's group that talked about the locks at Group 1. BJ Costello, who's involved in that group, actually approached Alan and I the other day and said they were one of the original award recipients in December. And he said, we're in the midst of preparing our first update report. And obviously, when we get those, we will submit those to you for your review and edification. But that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. So a number of the projects obviously could only be partially funded.
Correct.
Do they plan to move forward?
They do. And that was one of the questions and one of the considerations. We thought, is this funding your sole and only funding? And you'll notice, like, for example, I'm just going to call out, because I'm also the county executive appointee at the Egg. The Egg Board, they have $1 million request with a $30,000 grant. They are actually using this grant to leverage other individuals who have said, if you can show support from the county, that we would be happy to support this as well. And so, yes, there will be, nobody was funded in their entirety. But some of the smaller grants, actually, that's not true. Some of the smaller grants were funded in their entirety because we knew those grants would be harder to try and find matching funds or try and find additional funds, like for the Colony Senior Center. I think we said basically anybody that had a grant application under $20,000 got full funding for their grants.
So, first of all, I want to thank the group for the number of times they met reviewing these applications. Again, this is a non-paid function, and people. I didn't hear what he said, but it's not a laugh.
It's not paid.
People were involved with enthusiasm. More importantly, I want to thank the county exec, the chair, for recognizing that arts and culture is the low man on the totem pole when it comes to support, and it's the county that has provided leadership in this arena. It drives me crazy. I have this conversation with the mayor, and the mayor has been, she knows how to bob and weave on this subject better than anyone I know. And as you probably read, the federal funding that many of these organizations historically received has all been cut. I think it's foolish because you don't have a viable city, you don't have a viable community without arts and culture. And I could go on, but I'm not going to. So I hope, Joanne, when you're talking with fellow legislators and Mike, I've expressed this to the county exec, how grateful I am, and I think on behalf of the Alliance that you provide continued support. John, you can't make the recommendation. Will someone make a recommendation that we approve this list?
Yeah, so there's a resolution in front of you, Chair, that does that. And just to briefly recap, in July of last year, this board approved a grant program on the arts. And as part of that process, you created this advisory council to assist the corporation. Ultimately, the corporation makes the decisions. That's your job as the board. The advisory council makes the recommendation on their own, and that's the list, that's Exhibit A to this resolution. But the board ultimately, pursuant to our program, is the approval authority, and that's what you see in the resolution before you. The Exhibit A that's referenced in the resolution is what we're looking at now, should we choose to pass it. And the blank line, there were two solicitations for grant applications, November of 24 and then March of 25. The November 24 led to the first batch that we funded, that this board chose to fund in December. And then this next set has a few left over from the original grant application, but mostly are from the March 25 grant application process. So that's the resolution if the board so chooses.
So is there a motion?
Motion,
Thank you.
Second.
Again, any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Thank you all very much. Thank you, John. I just, anyone that complains that you weren't there this morning, send them to me. Sorry. Is there any other business to come before us?
Do we need to do executive session or no?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there's one potential real estate transaction that I'd like to discuss with the board in executive session.
Okay, so we're gonna vote to go out, to adjourn the meeting.
Sir, so the motion would be, if the board so chose, would be to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing the potential disposition of real publicity and which would substantially affect the value thereof.
Mhm.
So
So we can adjourn the meeting and then go into executive session, or we gotta come back
You're
in?
gonna come back and
Okay.
we'll close the meeting out in open session immediately
Okay,
on
it's
this.
very lucky you're here.
Hmm.
So do we have to vote on that?
Yes, sir.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I want to thank all of you who have joined us today, and we're going to move into executive